Spider-Man artists don't get enough credit for their hard work, and I believe that is an actual crime. Whenever someone mentions a specific section of story with, like, Roger Stern's run or Straczynski's run, people will usually discuss the plots, but whenever they discuss the art, it's usually only stuff like, oh, the art looked good, looked kind of weird, or my new personal favorite that I've seen, Peter looks like a Neanderthal. Art is more than just good. It's great and never gets the appreciation that it almost definitely deserves, but that is no longer happening. These videos are going to be discussing all the main star artists that covered the Amazing Spider-Man runs at the different ages. I'm going to be covering what I consider the gold, silver, bronze, and modern ages. The golden age will be the 1960s to 1970s, silver is for the 1980s to the 90s, bronze will be for 2000 to 2015, and modern will be 2015 to current. This specific video topic will be discussing only the Golden Age, which started with the original Steve Ditko, but before him, Jack Kirby actually made a Spider-Man design. Jack Kirby was the man behind the original Avengers, Fantastic Four, and the X-Men. Yeah, this guy did a whole lot back in the day. He made 2 original designs. He was more of a techie kind of guy, so his first design was nothing what you'd expect from Spider-Man. He looked like a space ranger because he had a fucking gun with him. But Peter looked good, and I honestly would have been very interested to see what kind of stories he was going to have. But it was originally based off of Captain America, but didn't really scream Spider within the Spider-Man other than just the logo. There was a second one that was much closer, but it isn't really discussed like at all. But Stan Lee, not really liking the design since it didn't really fit the character description that he had with Peter, made the best decision since creating sliced bread. He asked Steve Ditko to help and design it for him. I unironically would allow this man to take my kids from me and raise them. And there is nothing more in this world that I love than Steve Ditko. His design and art was on another level of fantastic, but also simple and effective, especially when compared to comics of today. Everything, and I mean everything, is amazing to look at and understand. He created so many villains: Green Goblin, Electro, Dr. Octopus. And a little funny thing that I would like to add is that he drew Aunt May like an actual corpse. I don't know why, but half of the shots she's in, she looks like she's a skeleton wearing a wig. But Peter, on the other hand, versus when he drew Spider-Man, whenever Peter is outside of the costume, he looks, frail, small, weak. Not really like a chump, but nothing too out of the ordinary. But whenever he is Spider-Man, he has this weird posture and aura and just overall just stature about him that really makes him feel like a hero and just like, he's here to save the day. The fights shown are in an effective manner that can make it easy to follow. Clear ranges of motion, points of contact, and destruction, which I like because there are a lot of shots where Spider-Man just bursts through into walls and destroys stuff. However, one thing that cannot be missed when discussing Steve's storytelling is If This Be My Destiny, a three-part story with a moment of Peter struggling to lift an immovable object that has to do in order to save his aunt. Bit off track, but this scene ended up being one of my favorites when comparing to the other stories surrounding on Spider-Man. Fortunately, Steve did end up leaving the Spider-Man team and Marvel altogether, mainly for creative differences, but leaving John Romita Sr. take the mantle. Romita started working on Spider-Man starting on issue 39, but prior to this, he worked with Stan on Daredevil like a few months back. That's his little test run first. Romita is usually the one people think about when they think of early Spider-Man design, since he worked on it for twice as long as Ditko ever did. He originally worked as a replacement, mimicking Ditko's style, thinking that he would come back, but he never actually did. The first piece he worked on was the one with Green Goblin and revealing his backstory. As time moved on, he eventually grew the book into his own style, with different types of panels, because Ditko usually drew it in a 9 3x3 panels, but he kept to that at first, but eventually started to expand. And other than that, he did start to make Peter look like one of those really good traditional protagonists, especially when comparing Peter from Ditko and Romita. And considering that Peter now looks like a fully grown adult, Peter's built and his body figure is probably the best out of all of them. When considering like the future Spider-Man, Mike Ditto Jr., I like his, but nothing. He's like way too shredded in my opinion. Back to the topic. Romita ended up making even more characters than Ditko did, but not nearly as important. He made Kingpin Shocker. And oh yeah, I guess Mary Jane, who ended up becoming Peter's wife and one of the most important characters ever to be introduced in the Spider-Man series. This design for Spider-Man ended up being a design for everything, and it wasn't just comics, it was for toys, commercials, like, you name it was probably there. Picture of ice cream on the screen right now, look. His style would be replicated and became the quote-unquote house style for the comics for the next, I would say, 10 years. But over time, Romita started to fizzle out working on Spider-Man, with his next replacement being Gil Kane. Kane started working on Spider-Man during issue 96 with some assistance from Romita when he first started. As mentioned previously, this art still has a very strong inspiration and basing off of Romita's artwork. However, there are some distinct differences that help stand out and make the two unique in their own way. Kane really likes to add detail and texture to the faces, makes them appear more lively and more dynamic. Poses are shown, which, help with tension and feeling that characters might have with like worry or frustration. One thing I must say is that this is a man that knows how to draw action scenes like never before in Western comics. The others are good, like John Romita Jr. and Sr., but here it shows just the right amount of emphasis of the tension and how hard something really hits, depending, like every hit is unique in their own way. I'll show you a picture on the screen right now. His Green Goblin and Spider-Man fights were some of my personal favorites of all time. Kane also drew one of the most iconic scenes ever drawn. Yep, you're thinking of that right. Morbius versus the Lizard? No, yep, that's right. Gwen Stacy, Death of Gwen Stacy. It was a double-parter series where the Green Goblin ended up killing the woman Peter loved. Believe it or not, this is one of the few times that a character stayed dead. Only like maybe Jean DeWolf in Shooting in the Dark here, Big Wheel, ended up staying dead. But the point is that this was a very important story for everybody that knew comics and Spider-Man as a whole, but there is one more artist before the end of the golden age of Spider-Man in my terms, that being Ross Andrew, I believe I'm saying that right. He started working on issue 125, and to say in the simple terms, he is the worst out of all four of them. Now, I'm not saying he's bad, don't get me wrong, he's still great, but compared to the others, he doesn't really have much of a distinct style or something about him that really elevates him or makes him stand out. He did, however, brings a tear to my eye. He was the man that created the Spider Buggy, which is the amazingest card ever made in comic history. This clears out the Batmobile in levels of swagger. But jokes aside, this clearly was a sign that Spider-Man comics were starting to lose a bit of their steam and were running low on ideas. This wasn't exactly an era for peak talent in comics. My personal rankings of these four pencilists are going to go Ditko, Kane, Romita, and Andrew. None of them were bad by any means. They were all great and did their job well. However, I just felt more of a connection towards Ditko's than anyone else. Mainly since I just keep finding myself going back to reread Ditko's work, and I put Kane above Romita simply because I enjoyed his art just a smidgen more. That's all the artists for this section during the Golden Age. I do appreciate and love the effort that all of them put into making Spider-Man the household name that it is now. Silver Age is going to cover the Roger Stern era to right before the Straczynski run next video, and I'll cover about 22 years and a whole bunch of new talent. I mean a whole bunch, including stories with the Black Suit and Venom. However, this will only discuss the mainline Spider-Man run. Amazing Spider-Man, not doing like Peter Parker, Spectacular, because that's a whole nother can of worms I'm not going to open up for this one. But that's all I have for today. Hope you have a good day.